One woman once said during a session, "If I ever heard someone speak to anyone the way my inner voice speaks to me, I'd probably call the cops. And if your inner voice also talks to you in ways that would justify calling the police, then it's a very good thing you clicked on this video." And no, it didn't just randomly show up in your feed. It found you for a reason. Today, we're going to talk about why some people have an inner voice that feels like a gentle friend, someone who listens, helps, and accepts you unconditionally, while for others it's more like a strict, overachieving coach, or a helpless, whining victim, or even worse, a toxic, demeaning abuser you can't seem to escape. And yes, there are other types too, but we'll get to them later. For now, drop a comment and tell me, what is your inner voice like? Who does it sound like? What role does it play? I'd love to hear how you would describe it. In this video, we're going to talk about how to first identify your inner voice, how to negotiate with it, and how to manage it in alignment with your current goals and desires. Because your inner voice can either be your greatest ally or your worst enemy. And one of the most classic questions in this topic is what I call a marker question. Here it is. Would you ever speak to your closest friend, someone you genuinely want the best for, the same way your inner voice speaks to you? Because that's what's happening. Your inner monologue is speaking to you, whether you're listening consciously or not. Let's talk about where that voice even comes from. Because your inner dialogue, like you, is born in childhood. As children, we're not free, not emotionally, not physically, not mentally. We don't get to choose our surroundings, our caregivers, our reality. We're 100% dependent on the world around us, and that world becomes our system, our blueprint, our God. So the child learns to adapt, not because it's right or wrong, but because it's the only option. A child has no agency. A child cannot walk away. So instead of changing the system, she changes herself to fit it. That's where your inner voice is born, in adaptation, in survival. If love was conditional, your inner voice learned to perform. If mistakes were punished, it learned to self-punish before others could. If shame was the tool, your inner voice became a master of it. What started as protection became your prison. But here's the thing. As you enter adolescence, something shifts. You start to awaken. You begin to form opinions, desires, boundaries. You start hearing your own voice, not just echoing everyone else's. This is the beginning of psychological adulthood. And yet, so many people never complete that transition. They grow up on the outside, but keep obeying the same voices from the inside. Voices that were never theirs to begin with. So what happens? You become an adult who still shrinks when they're criticized, still panics when they make a mistake, still whispers, "I'm not enough," even when there's no one left to say it to you. Why? Because the voice was internalized, and no one ever taught you that you could rewrite it. You're no longer a powerless child, so stop living like one. You don't need a voice that protects you from your own life. You need one that helps you build it. And that means having an inner dialogue that serves your current reality, your actual goals, your adult boundaries, your real self, not your scared, conditioned, outdated self. Because the voice in your head should evolve when you do. And if it hasn't, it's time. One person said the following about their internal dialogue. "My inner voice is a real bully, the worst and most relentless I've ever encountered. Imagine being brutalized your whole life by a bully that has access to each and every one of your deepest, shameful secrets and memories, and not being able to shut it off. Imagine how broken you might become with the decades. and I cannot hate anyone for that but myself. Just imagine what it's like to live with such thoughts, and how difficult it is to transform if a person has lived with this type of thinking for decades. It's not just about stop thinking like that, change from Monday. This is about physiological changes at the level of neural connections in the brain. Typically, the transition path occurs within the following scenario. She used to be mean to herself, constantly, but one day she got sick of it. She had a revolt in her mind, and she won. She began to stand up for herself, against herself. She made a choice to be kind, to be loving, to treat herself with the same care she gave everyone else. That choice became the foundation for what would become an extraordinary life. And after a while, that cruel voice inside her head simply disappeared. Anyone can do this. It takes no talent, just the decision to stop being your own worst enemy. What finally worked in this transformation was understanding that no one in this world will truly understand you but you, just as no one can truly care for you but you. The world is already eager to put you down, which is exactly why it's so important to have your own back. Because at the end of the day, all you really have is yourself. I spent my whole life in service of others, always putting people who didn't even think of me above myself. And I kept asking, why was I so kind and compassionate toward everyone except me? But then it hit me. I am the only constant in my life, and I must value myself because I am all that I have. Since then, I felt more at peace with myself, needing less from others, and finally paying more attention to me. One of the practices that's been incredibly effective for working with my inner voice goes like this. When my inner chatter gets so loud and harsh that it feels like this voice is abusing me, harassing me, and just won't quiet down, I sit down and I write out everything it's saying, bluntly, explicitly, no sugarcoating. I end up with a list of horrible, horrible things about myself. Things like, you are a waste of oxygen. Then I try to read it with new eyes. I imagine that I didn't just write it, but that someone else handed it to me. I try to view it as objectively as possible, and then I begin writing a new list in response to it, a more optimistic, more compassionate one. Next to you are disgusting and unlovable, I write something like, many people love and appreciate me. People have found me attractive, and I myself have felt attractive before. I think back to a time when I truly felt good about myself. I try to recall compliments I've received, especially from people who genuinely cared, and I go through the entire list this way, line by line. Every toxic sentence gets an answer. Every lie gets a correction. Every wound gets a little bit of healing. And when I'm done with that second list, I read it once, twice, maybe more. I let it sink in, and something inside me starts to shift. From my experience in therapy, I learned that my inner critic was not actually my own voice. It was an accumulation of all the hurtful, negative comments that I was told growing up, especially from my parents and other family members. I internalized comments they made about my appearance, telling me I was weird or dumb when I had an undiagnosed anxiety disorder and depression, telling me I'm selfish when I tried to assert my boundaries, or disagreed with their views, or lashing out at me if I made a small mistake. Once I became aware of this, I was able to recognize that I was being too hard on myself sometimes. It is all right to make mistakes. It is all right to be different and have a mental health condition. If you've experienced trauma, this includes emotional abuse. It's okay to assert your boundaries and prioritize your well-being. I suggest thinking about the things your caregivers, teachers, etc. told you growing up. Maybe that voice you're hearing isn't yours. And when you hear this voice, stop and think, if you would talk to other people like that? If your friend failed an exam, would you insult them, criticize them, or berate them? I don't think so. I tell my daughters, whatever you tell yourself believes. This quote will come up when they get frustrated with themselves, or something didn't go their way, and they call themselves stupid, or fat, or ugly. I've tried to train them since they were very young to try to say positive remarks to themselves. It is a struggle for us all. A psychological hack I learned lately. To have a positive self-talk, we need to see the world in terms of cause and effect instead of the simplistic thinking of rewards and punishments. Since we are talking about controlling the thought's cause and effect model, will save us from blaming others when things go wrong. Lastly, we need to practice gratefulness and self-respect to start positive self-talk. Writing down your inner chatter really helps to realize the negative thoughts. Chatter almost always has been something external that we internalized slowly. Realizing whose voice the chatter is really helps us minimize it. For example, if you realize the chatter is something a friend once probably said and you didn't realize that you internalized it, you can just tell the voice, "Hey man, relax, don't be so mean." From a practical real-life perspective, the structure of the situation looks like this. There's us, and there's our objective reality. There's what we have right now, and there's what we want, our ideal, our vision, our goal. And naturally, there's a gap between the two, between where we are and where we want to be. But at the same time, there's a third force at play, our mind, our inner dialogue, that voice inside our head that's always speaking, always commenting, always directing. And here's the question we rarely ask. Is that voice actually helping us move toward our goal? Or is it silently leading us in the opposite direction? Is it the kind of voice that pushes so hard that it slams the gas pedal to the floor until we lose control and crash? Or is it the kind that hits the brakes so often that we never even start the journey? We all have goals. We all have dreams. And most of us already have everything we need to move toward them. Maybe even today. But the real question is, can your inner voice be trusted to guide you there? Or is it the very thing that's keeping you from the life you want? Leave a comment. What do you think about this? This channel is called She Needs to Hear This for a reason, because it needs to be heard. Here, we unpack 100 of the most relevant and powerful topics for modern women living in a modern world. And if you know a woman who might need this conversation, share it with her, because I'm sure you have a friend who needs to hear this too. Let's grow this space, a space for conscious, self-aware women. Together, we are stronger.